All right, so today we're super lucky. We've got a very talented DP, Drew Daniels, who you might know from his work on the movie Anora, which is getting all sorts of buzz, both nominated at the Golden Globes and possibly at the Oscars later. So we're extremely lucky to have Drew come in and talk to us about his work on Anora and a bit about his career. So thanks, Drew.
Well, thanks for having me. I love talking about Anora.
So before we get into the movie itself, what was your basic trajectory into film? Like, how did you get into this stuff?
Um, well, I can't help but think it probably all started with skateboarding because when you're a skate rat, basically you film everything. You film your whole life, and we were really inspired by like Jackass and CKY2K videos, girl videos. They always do these skits and stuff, and it just kind of puts a camera in your hands all the time. And I was really into the skating part of it more so than the filming. We had like a friend who was like the filmer, but I kind of gravitated more towards filming once I got into college. I had to pick something to study. And I was like, oh, I'm always around cameras. I really like cameras. And so I chose cinematography, or I chose film in general. Like our school didn't really have a specific cinematographer's track. It was a University of Texas at Austin, which I loved. And UT is a very DIY school, and they've got their alum, is like Richard Linklater, Robert Rodriguez. So it's just like this very anti Hollywood or sort of grungier DIY aesthetic. Um, and I really gravitated towards that. I got myself into the film school, and then I got on a film set, and immediately as soon as I was on a film set, I just knew like this is what I want to do. This is so much fun. I love the family that you create when you're on a film crew. I liked the teamwork, the like unified goal. Everybody has that goal where we're just trying to make a good movie and tell a good story. And then I saw the cinematographer working, and I gravitated towards that immediately. Like that was the thing. Like that seemed like the best job on set. And then so I started working on grad films as like a second AC, observing the cinematographer, taking notes. That was the good thing I found about being a second AC as opposed to a first. First ACs are so tied up in marks, focus. It's such a high stress job. But the second, I feel like, you take a couple notes, you grab the lens, you help set up the camera, and then you kind of observe, you're keeping track of the slate and count film counter, that kind of thing. But other than that, like I was like literally in my notebook drawing lighting diagrams and taking notes about lenses and whatnot, and I learned a lot as a second. And then I kind of became known as like a shooter at school, and I just started shooting and shooting and shooting and putting myself out there to shoot other people's jobs or film school projects. I shot a documentary that a lot of people really dug, and I directed it and shot it, and that kind of became like my little calling card in film school. People saw that and they're like, "Oh, this guy has like a really uh, like kind of raw style," and I was like really getting in there with the camera and very visceral, and um, yeah, that. So then I just kept shooting and shooting in film school, and then when I graduated, I just kind of called myself a cinematographer for many years, even though that that took a lot of guts, I think, because you're so amateur and you're so naive and arrogant in a way, but and inexperienced. But I really just felt I was a cinematographer, and I just wanted to shoot. And so I found a way that I could live really cheap in Austin, Texas, for many years, just taking on small indie films, Craigslist jobs, literally scouring the internet for whatever job I could get. And then I
You
got
got
my
you got jobs off Craigslist?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was shooting wedding videos. I was shooting like quinceañeras, like whatever I could shoot. In addition to camera operator on this live show, or South by Southwest was always an opportunity to get some money because you could book yourself shooting as one of the live, camera operators at the many, many venues during South by. So I was basically just hustling, but also trying to like shoot some cool short films. And um, I was really lucky to shoot a feature really young because my film school professor was directing it. And um, basically what happened was it was Saturday Morning Massacre was the name of it. It was like a mumblecore horror film, like multi-camera DSLRs, but a really good cast and a really great location. And I was the camera operator at first, and day two the DP quits. He's just like, this is not for me. The pace of it, the psychotic schedule, the 16-hour days and whatever. So I bumped up to DP, and it went really well. And so that was like kind of one of my first opportunities. The second one came with Krisha, this very small film shot in the suburbs of Houston for Trey Edward Schultz, who I went on to shoot two more films with. And Krisha really put me on the map because it won South by Southwest, which for me was like the ultimate, it's the hometown festival, and a big one, and it has a lot of power. So we won South by, and then we went to Cannes, and then we went to the Indie Spirit Awards, and we won the John Cassavetes Award. So this tiny film shot for $30,000 on a red, you know, that was it. That it was a red epic. That was the one that really put me on the map. So
Cool. Well, I think there's a lot of similarities there. I actually came out of skate culture as well in Ontario, which is not as cool as the American version. But yeah, I remember all that early media. I think we're probably roughly the same age, same generation. I
yeah,
remember all the CKY2K and all that stuff coming out, and where
yeah,
how I think skate and snowboarding and stuff like that really pushed the envelope of what small productions could do with minimal gear. I think
hmm
those guys really started to do some interesting stuff, and surfing videos especially started to get really story driven and stuff. So that was a
yeah,
big motivator for myself as well.
yeah. And I can't help but like think that Spike Jones was probably one of the biggest influences on me and my friends, and even subconsciously we didn't even really know a lot of the films we were watching were Spike Jones, like some of the chocolate videos and the girl videos. And then the guy goes on and makes being John Malkovich and Adaptation, all these great films. And yeah, so it was, I think it's almost like subconscious, but I feel like Spike Jonze is one of the probably biggest influences on the skaters that turn into filmmakers generation.
Yeah, the chocolate one especially stood out. Did you ever see an old ES video called Medic Matai?
Oh yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Well,
that
I've
one,
seen
that
that.
one especially
I
back in
probably
the
seen
day.
it over 100 times.
Yeah, same thing. I was like in my room with the DVD, like, what is this? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, very cool, man. So, in terms of film school, like, especially on the internet, I don't know how active you are in the film social media scene, but it's become extremely popular to bash film school,
Uh,
and like say like no one should go to film school, just learn it all yourself. But I'm curious like what your experience with film school was, what you got out of it, like would you go back if you did it again?
I mean, I can understand that point of view because now having like gone through it and found success in the film industry, I'm sure there's other ways to do it. I mean, easily you could start PAing and then find your people that way. That, you know, PAing could be your film school, or maybe being an assistant to a cinematographer, or whatever you want to do. That could easily be your film school. But for me, I just didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I didn't really know much about films. That's the big difference. I feel like now a lot of people know about like the behind the scenes of how films are made, and I think the internet has made it all, and also cameras nowadays have made it all way more accessible. So you kind of can with almost no money, make a film that looks really, really good. Whereas like when I was shooting, you know, the best digital camera that you could get your hands on was maybe like an HVX or something, you know, and then it became DSLRs, and then it started to, you know, democratize it a bit. Um, but like I loved my film school experience. It's like where I found my people, my professors that inspired me. It's where I learned to watch films critically, to analyze and break down films and understand what they're doing. I just really understand the craft of it. So for me personally, I loved it. I wouldn't change it back for a million. You know, I wouldn't go back. I loved it. Is also, I got the college experience in Austin, Texas, which was an amazing place to go to film school. Just an amazing city. I love it there. Um, so you know, it was great. I could see it. I've had people tell me that their film school experiences were not like mine. And I also saw a lot of people come out of film school and do nothing.
Mm.
So, you know, you kind of have to find that spark and and have that ambition. If you don't, then you probably shouldn't even be in the film industry. You know what I mean? Like it takes
Yeah.
a lot of ambition, because there's a lot of no's that you get down a lot. There's a lot of, you know, you have these moments of inspiration and these moments of that build your confidence, but also you have moments that totally break your soul, you know, all the time. So um,
Yeah.
that's what
I
film
think
school
I
was.
think
It was a confidence booster in a big way. Like I don't think I would have been able to come out of film school and call myself a cinematographer unless I had gone to that school and shot like 5 films on 16 millimeter or whatever it was. It was probably more than that, and made a documentary and made that. You know, like I was able to get all this stuff done that that you know, I think if you don't go to film school, to get that list of credits immediately, like at like 21 years old or whatever, you know, is probably pretty challenging. But I remember, for instance, you know, I worked on Euphoria, and I remember the PAs on Euphoria. They were really inspiring because they were really good, and they all were friends, and they all clicked together, and they were all like, I would hear that stories about them, like, oh yeah, my film, talking about my film, my film, my film, and then they would like work on each other's films. And the same thing on Anora. Like the PAs on Anora were like those were the most motivated PAs I've ever met. Like incredible. They're filmmakers. Like every single one of them is a passionate filmmaker, a film lover. Um, you know, so I could see those guys like not really needing to go to film school, because they're the like PAs that are working on all of the really cool indie films in New York, and they stay together and they are going to come up together. So I think it's all about just finding your people, and however you do that, you know, it's your choice. It's probably a lot cheaper to do it just by PAing and, you know, doing it that way. But you know, it is a cool way to do it, because you know, especially like for instance, working in New York City on like a non-union indie films, you kind of get, if you do a good job, you're going to get on another one and another one and another one. Like they really stick together. They have a really tight indie film community up there. You know, I think Anora is a good example, and I know there's a lot more. There's a handful of like line producers and indie producers up there that are just making really cool, audacious work, like cinematographers too. Sean Price Williams, you know, everything that guy shoots is like non-union and beautiful, shot on film, super indie, and has a lot of guts, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, man, I think that's an important point. Like I've seen it work a million different ways, but the people who make it are always the ones who are going to do it no matter what, whether they go to film school or not. And it's sort of like, you
Yeah,
see people in film school who are hoping that it'll be done for them, who end up doing nothing. And then vice versa. You see people who are, say they hate film school, but are just not hustling. And you're like, well, if like I didn't go to film school, for example, and I just like refuse to, you want to talk about being embarrassed to call yourself a cinematographer. When I transitioned from stills into video and I put up that first video focused website saying that I was a documentary cinematographer, like the mental anguish that caused,
yeah,
how awkward it was. But, I basically refused to do anything else. And I think you kind of need that. And anyone who has that and is like, I'm doing this and I'm all in will probably make it no matter which route they take.
mm,
Um, but yeah, the
yeah,
network, the network would be amazing.
yeah. I feel like you also have to be wary of the people who are like shameless self promoters and really good at Instagram. Because
Mm,
those people, and that is a
yeah.
good skill to have, especially now. You can do that. It's like a free, advertising for yourself. But I see a lot of people that are like really good at making themselves seem like they're super busy and productive and making great work all the time. But I don't know. I've never been one to do that. I feel like Anora is the most I've ever promoted anything because I'm doing it also for Sean and for our actors and Coco, and I really love the film too. I feel like it's like kind of one of my favorite films that I've done that feels like my true expression, artistic expression. It's my kind of film. You know what I mean? So I'm really trying
Yeah.
to be like, this is my stuff right here. This is what I do.
Yeah, man. Well, it's my type of film too. It's fantastic. Really well done. Um, I mean, I think the Instagram thing. I talk to a lot of people who spend most of their time on the social media side of things, and I'm always like, your Instagram is probably not going to get you the jobs that you want. Like the personal relationships are what's going to get you hired, and your body of work. No one's going to like stumble across you on Instagram and be like, I'm bringing this person on to, I mean, it's kind of unlikely to get, you know, you're not getting hired for Anora based on your Instagram profile, right? It's like based on your body of work and your experience and your personal relationships, I imagine.
Yeah, and also honestly, a huge part of it is like your personality. Like I think when you're in the room when you're meeting a director, I think so much of it is about personality. Is like, are you a good fit? One way I remember when I did Krisha, Trey's mom, who is in the film, and Trey's the director, right? And we're all like, it's very indie. This is like 10 people making this film, all sleeping in the house, on the floors, on couches, like whatever. Like it was all in that house. And his mother's in the film, is the star. And I remember when his mom first met me and saw me and Trey working together. This is like this is her son. She's very protective, and she saw us working together, and she was like, she told me that she had like this feeling, like, oh my god, like it's a play date, and they're playing well together. The kids are playing well together. And like now
Mm,
being a parent, I could totally get that when your kid meets a kid that is just like the perfect connection. It's like a really beautiful thing. So I think that happens when you meet a director and you guys play well together. It's like a that's I guess that's a funny way to put it, but it feels like that. Like with Trey and with Sean, those are like my two favorite directors that I work with, and I just have felt this trust and playfulness. Like they allow me to be playful with the camera, and they allow me to experiment. And also, I rely entirely on them as well. As far as like, well, first thing I ask is always is like, well, what are you thinking? Like, I just want to know what they're thinking, and if it's like something we're both stumped on, then we just have to like kind of deconstruct it together and find, you know, what it is we're after and what the scene is about and this and that. But usually I work with writer directors too, and like I really like that because, and also editor, the writer director editor. I love it. I think that's the best combination because you're talking to like the brain, you're talking to the person. It's all coming from one source, and of course they wrote it with ideas in mind about how it could look or about what's important in the scene or point of view or this and that, you know. It actually makes
Mhm.
my job a lot easier when the writer is the director.
Yeah, I feel like the relationship side of things are what a lot of people don't seem to get. Like when I look at my own career, 90% of the gigs that I get are built off of probably it's less than 10 people, maybe even as few as 5 who are, you know, constantly either hiring me or sharing my name with other people. But like when I
Yeah.
trace back all the major good jobs I have, it all comes back to a really small group of people. Has that been your experience?
Oh yeah, like of course. I mean, the one of the reasons I met Sean Baker is through Trey Schultz. Like Trey recommended me because Sean I think reached out and was asking about me, and then because he knew I was from Texas or I'd lived in Texas, and we were gonna go shoot Red Rocket. So that was a big thing. Like, yeah, I mean, and also like producers. I believe who was it? Like Alex Sachs is recommend. You work well with someone, they're gonna recommend you to other people. Like that's just the best way to get jobs. So that's why you should not be an asshole. That's why you should be nice to everybody. That's why you should try to keep your ego in check, um, and be patient um, and also just respectful of other people's craft as well. Like especially actors, like it's not always about the cinematography. That's one
Yeah,
thing. Like,
you get Christian Baled.
yeah, no, it's true. Like I totally sympathize with Christian Bale in
Yeah.
that circumstance. Like um, you wanna give them space. It's a really freaking hard job to be an actor and to like stay in character while like all the chaos is happening. Like you want to try to mitigate that and like minimize all of the chaos and make this base around the camera a very safe space, especially once the actors are in there. It's almost like you don't even mess with the actor. It's like the director's time once the actors are in there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, last career thing, and then we're going to get into the movie. But based on what you see out there today, and we are talking about networking and building this small group of people who come back to you again and again. If you were starting out again today, how would you go about starting to grow that network, assuming you didn't go to a really great film program? Based on what you're seeing in the industry, what would you kind of recommend people to do?
Um, hmm. Well, I would probably try to find a camera department to PA in. Um, and I'd look on Instagram or whatever and find cinematographers or camera assistants. I would find the cinematographers, and then I would find who are their usual camera assistants. And then I'd reach out to them and be like, "Hey, I want a camera PA. Um, let me know. Like, I'll do anything. You have to really put yourself out there in that way." And then you know what I would do? I would buy like an FX3. I'd buy a little Sony FX3 and maybe a zoom lens and some ND filters and a little tripod, and I would try to make films. I think the FX3 is an incredible camera, and or you could maybe get like a lens adapter and use some of your old, stills photos. You should also take stills. I think that's very important. I think you should almost train your brain to look for light. I think that's one of the things that having a camera, a photo camera, a stills camera will do for you, especially shooting black and white, because all you're looking for is light and contrast. Like even this light hitting me right now, like in black and white, that would look sick. Right. Like so you just train your eye. You train your eye to look for light, to look for composition. Having a camera around will help that. Try to ditch your iPhone camera as much as you can. Although they say the best camera you have is the one that's on you. Um, but yeah, so I think that's it. And then like what I was saying about the Anora PAs and the Euphoria PAs, it's like find some PAs that are also ambitious. You know, talk to the other PAs and be like, hey, all right, what do you want to do? You want to be a director? I want to be a producer. I want to be a DP. Like that's how stuff happens. And I think that when they're crewing up, they're gonna hit you up, and you never know. Like that PA, that key set PA on Anora, wink wink, might be the next like big director, or big Hollywood producer in like 5-10 years. Um, so I think that's a really good path. I think if you're not going to go to film school,
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah, man.
only getting easier.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially in the camera side of things, neglect stills. Like when I used, people told me for a while that I got really lucky because when I switched into video, it only took me about 6 months to start landing like pretty good gigs. And they're like, oh, well, easy for you to say it happened overnight success. And I was like, well, I was a professional stills photographer for 6 years before I transitioned. So like when I switched into actual film production, like it wasn't like I had a lot of the fundamental things, which is empathy towards people, a sense of visual story. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They're just
Yeah,
so focused. And also, yeah, I mean, I think that what you said about making connections on set, like I can always, you recognize immediately who's hustling and who stands out. Like when you're on a shoot, there's always a couple people where you're like, yeah, this person really has the attitude. They really want it, and I am going to bring them with me next time.
yeah. No, there's always the people on the film set who you can trust, like with a problem. They're the problem solvers. Even the PAs, especially the PAs, be like, "Hey, this is happening." Boom, tell someone, make it. Let's fix it. Like, or hey, I need this, and it might be a crazy thing, and they can find a way to make it happen. Like that. I think that half of filmmaking is just problem solving usually. So
Mm.
got to have people that are creative in terms of problem solving and critical thinking and who aren't like whiners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's no that's second only to the no assholes on set rule. No,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
whiners. All right, so Honora, um, relatively speaking, I mean, compared to some movies, Honora had a pretty small budget, right? Like it's not a massive production.
Yeah.
So, how did the size of the film influence the way that you approached it?
Oh, I mean, really big time. I mean, I think that often your limitations are what dictate a lot of your stylistic and creative choices. And I think that's okay. Like some people are like, oh, I just don't. I think you have to curate the film in a way to what the scope of it, what the budget is. I mean, that's a big mistake I find a lot of filmmakers making. It's like they just have like this ridiculously ambitious project and they have not even anywhere close to the resources available to do it. So like Anora is quite grounded, and the camera language is very grounded. It's like literally on the ground for one. There's like I don't think there's not even any there's no crane shots or anything like that. There's no techno cranes. We had like a jib for like one or two shots. Um, but we didn't really use it as like a big like sweeping jib type of thing. That wasn't part of the language. And actually, it's usually not part of the things that I do. I don't really like
It's
that.
almost doc-like in a way.
Yeah, I like on the ground filmmaking. Like I like the camera to be about right here, and I'd rather be wider and closer and in it. and simple, you know. So I think that's a big thing. I think simple and tailoring your film to your resources. I mean, some of the my favorite films are film like George Washington, like it's David Gordon Green's one of his first films. Absolutely beautiful, anamorphic 35, shot in like small town North Carolina with like mostly non actors, and incredible film. I remember watching that in film school. A lot of the films I watched in film school were films that sort of hammered that in, Slacker, like these little indie films with like big heart, and not big resources. So I think that's my my tip there,
Yeah, yeah. Don't be like, well, if I can finally once I can afford Alexa 65, I'll make this thing.
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you don't really need it. I mean, as long as you have like an interesting concept and an interesting story, then that's better than having the Alexa 65 and the brand new Airy rental lenses or the whatever it might be, like, or the newest Panavision lenses or the newest this or that or that. I mean, like, you could shoot on Zeiss super speeds with the FX3 and have an incredible film if the concept is there, Like, I think about Nickel Boys. I saw that recently, and it's a very simple film, and it's shot pretty much entirely in point of view with a Sony um, Rialto. They shot with the Venice and Rialto mode, So they're basically, so the camera is like this, and they could tilt, pivot, and it feels like your head, and it's just poetic, beautiful. I mean, I think it's revolutionary, and that's a very simple film with a big concept. I think it was probably a pretty small budget film as well. I don't know what it was, but Anora was around 6 million, which for me and for us, like, that felt big. That felt like what we needed. We're also taking that and stretching it to the absolute maximum. We have like private jets, we have a helicopter shot, we have a unit. We go to Vegas, we come back, we go back to that. It's like there's a lot going on in this little film.
the
Um,
mansion.
yeah, and the mansion location was mind blowing.
Yeah.
And we were there for like 3 weeks or something, and we shot for 39 days or something like that. So like that's very luxurious for our little film. So it's really smart producers knowing where to put the money and knowing how to just get away with murder, and just maximizing and keeping things simple and but bold. And again, like heart. The movie has so much heart. I think that's why it won the Palme d'Or. It just has oozes heart. You watch it and you just, I don't know. It just feels like a real powerful film that with filmmakers that really cared what they were doing and gave their all.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there is a feeling to it. I mean, I watched it on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning I emailed you, and there's just something about it. I was like, this is this is great. And like,
Yeah,
for anyone, $6 million. I mean, I've worked on reality shows with bigger budgets than that. Like, it's what you needed, but for anyone watching, like, that is not a huge budget in the scope of what people spend in film and TV. So, I mean, you really did
that's
do a
like a
lot.
30-minute episode of TV. You know,
Yeah.
like some, more or less, like it's, or maybe an hour-long episode of TV, but usually it's a little more than that. Yeah, it's not a lot. And
I
shooting
mean,
on 35 millimeter anamorphic in New York City, I mean, it's very ambitious.
I heard you somewhere on a podcast, I think, maybe, or maybe it was, I don't know, somewhere I heard you call the movie anti-Hollywood or anti-traditional. What what does that mean?
um, what does that mean? I guess to me, well, maybe it's not anti. Maybe it means more like it reminds me of the bold and intrepid Hollywood of the 70s, like sort of the Hollywood new wave, which in its essence was very like anti-Hollywood. It was doing the anti of like the of what films were doing before in like the 50s and early 60s and whatnot, you know. And I think this movie is like kind of the anti-blockbuster as well. It's like relatively unknown actors, all on location, like not always pretty. You know, I think that's a really important thing that I like to stress with my work is like it doesn't always have to be pretty. It's not about making pretty pictures, you know. Um, and the coverage is not like traditional Hollywood coverage. Um, the structure of the film, I just feel like so many things about it are just like non-traditional. I don't want to just say like anti-Hollywood, but like Sean is not like your typical Hollywood director, even though he does live in West Hollywood. um, he's very he's an auteur, you know, and I think there's a difference between auteurs making art and making a film to make money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I uh I feel like into what you said about the coverage really resonated with me because one of the things that I felt was like, I mean, you can tell me, I'm just guessing here, but it felt like a lot of the time you were just letting the scene play out and then filming what felt right rather than blocking everything. Is that right?
Sort of. I mean, well, it's actually quite blocked. I will say, like, it's much more controlled than you might think, and that's Sean's. That's I think that's what Sean. What makes him really special is like taking a scene that feels like pure chaos and purely natural and unblocked and unrehearsed and unscripted even, but it's none of those things. It's he doesn't necessarily do it like how you do it on a TV show where you like, all right, this is the scene, let's read it out loud. Okay, now let's block it. Okay. Now, okay, maybe we're here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now let's show the crew and let's mark it, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that. Like, that's just formulaic, and that's what a lot of people say is the right way to do it, but that's really not what we did. Oftentimes, me and Sean, um, we would kind of know what the master shot was, and sometimes once we're moving on to the scene, it's like Mikey's got to go to hair and makeup and stuff, you know, like she's got to get it changed. It's going to take 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So rather than like take all this time to block the scene out and blah, 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 I'll set up the shot and we'll block it with like our first AD and with Sean, and we'll figure out what the shot is. And then the actors come and we sort of rehearse it, tweak it with them. And then we just shoot it. We just shoot it as quickly as we can. We start to get into the shooting of it because for one, we don't want to waste a bunch of time, but for two, like Sean doesn't really like doing like big involved camera rehearsals where the actors are doing it how they're going to do it in the scene in a rehearsal. He's like he'd rather roll it, you know, just in case something magical happens. So we kind of have them do like a walkthrough so we can just at least see the compositions with the actors in it. And then if we need to make some small adjustments, we'll make those. And then we just get into the shooting of it. But I would say that it's quite blocked, quite rehearsed. And often Sean will rehearse out, you know, with the actors like away from the set, so that when he comes to the set, like we might go through the blocking, but all of the dialogue and all the rehearsed part of it is pretty fresh for me. You know, I'm seeing it kind of for the first time often when they're doing it, um, and I kind of like that. Um, but there are parameters. They have marks. They have there are shots and there's a shot design to it, you know.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, it did. It makes sense now that you say it. As I was watching it, I was just wondering, like, it sometimes for scenes like that, the where they're running out of the club after they find Yvonne and it's all chaotic and stuff. You know, it feels like you're just rolling with
Oh well,
things.
that is like that. Yeah, yeah. Often if it's handheld, I'm kind of just doing that. Yeah, handheld is another thing, but not that much of the film is handheld. Maybe 25% of it. I'd say mostly it's on a tripod or on a dolly. Um, and there's a bit of Steadicam. Steadicam stuff is kind of also rehearsed. Even though like it's rehearsed, all of the stuff is rehearsed, but it's still chaotic and it feels real. And I think that's part of what makes it makes Sean's film special, and also what makes this film so interesting too is it feels very alive and unpredictable. And
Mm.
I'd say especially once they leave the house after the home invasion and they're looking for Yvonne, like all of that stuff where they're just searching for Yvonne and like all the restaurants and this and that. A lot of that stuff is very off the cuff. I'm shooting through windows from across the street, and people don't even know we're shooting a movie. They'll go into a live restaurant or the pizza place, the place where the woman says like, "Oh, perhaps he was kidnapped." Like that's just like some woman who actually was said that. That wasn't scripted. That was just a real customer at that restaurant,
Mm.
and we're shooting from across the street. And then the courtroom was pretty wild, and I would say that was pretty. I didn't know where actors were necessarily going to go. We kind of sketched out a blocking for it, but then we just did it like a couple times from this angle, a couple times from this angle, a couple times from this angle, and you know, did it like on a long, all on the zoom lens, so I could be really really zoomed in and just kind of riff with the actors and the motions and the. That was one of my favorite scenes to shoot. Actually, it was hilarious shooting that scene. We shot it super fast too. We only had like so much time in the courthouse,
Mm.
so we had to find a way that was like fast that we could shoot it. So it's like very minimal lighting, and I'm just kind of hosing it down from this angle and hosing it down from this angle, but on a tripod, and very considered, and with these zooms and pans, and just kind of playing with the dynamics in the scene, and having fun with it, and bringing that comedy, that playfulness of the camera into the comedy of the scene. I think it actually helped.
It's interesting, actually, that you said that only 25% of the movie's handheld. I've only watched it once, but I think some of the scenes that I would have guessed the opposite, just from my memory of it, because I have this memory of the chaoticness of that, leaving the club and the Vegas with the LED roof and all that stuff, and I just have this memory of this very moving film, but actually I guess it's much more selective than I remember, and it just like has more impact.
And that's one of the things about Sean, that when I first worked with him on Red Rocket, I was so shocked because I thought that he was like that. I thought it was going to be like, Terrence Malick, or, like just loose, or like Harmony Korine or something, where you're just loose and you're just like letting the actors riff and you just roll and roll and roll. And, it's not like that at all. It's actually very controlled. And I'd say for the most part, if we can do it in a very controlled and composition heavy frame, like just very formal compositional frame, like he loves that. He almost prefers that. But then
Hmm.
you like add chaos into that, and then you throw something into the mix to fuck it all up a little bit, and then now you have like more of a Sean Baker movie.
Yeah, interesting. Even if, yeah, I mean, I definitely know his like from Florida Project and stuff like that. Like he's really like, he really likes these cool locked off shots. Yeah, it's just interesting. It
Yeah,
wasn't my feeling of the movie, but I have to rewatch it again now after talking to you.
maybe it's a
Um,
little more 5%. I can't
yeah, yeah, but
say.
it
But
wasn't all handheld. Yeah, yeah, it
yeah, no,
was.
it's not all. Yeah, it's much more considered. Maybe it was like 40%.
Yeah,
But
but I guess maybe that's because of that they have such an impact, those scenes, right? When everything does kick off and it switches into that mode, it's such a contrast that you're like, "Oh."
yeah, and even the scenes that are on a dolly and whatnot, they have a lot of life to them, and a lot of movement, and
Mm, yeah.
um, maybe not camera movement, but there's just like a lot of like in and out of frame, and just kind of messiness happening, which I think helps and gives it life, unpredictability.
So, in terms of gear, not I don't want to talk necessarily just about all the specifics of the stuff you picked, but how did the movie itself lead you to make certain gear choices?
Um, I mean, I'd say the movie itself, not the
Like the
logistics.
story. Why did you shoot it the way you did? Why did you pick the tools you did?
Well, I mean, a lot of it came from Sean. I'm just going to be honest. Like, right from the beginning, Sean was like, "Oh, we should shoot this on Lomos, which are older '70s Russian lenses, and they have everything that anamorphic is known for. Like they're funky. They have a lot of fall off, distortion, softness. I mean, flares, the orbital flares, and there's that one scene where she's dancing, in the living room for him, and she gets on top of him and takes her shirt off, and it's just like this crazy array of flares. Which the movie doesn't have a lot of flares, but when it does, it's like that.
Hmm.
Or when the mom comes down the steps at the airport, off the plane, and it's just like dramatic, crazy lens flares. Um,
Did
so
you
like,
shine lights in from the side? Like, did you do that intentionally, or was that
no,
just
that's just the sun. Yeah. So yeah, that was always part of the visual look of the film, and like that was established early on. Sean was like, "Well, what about Lomos?" And I was like, "That's a great idea. The film is literally about Russians. Let's shoot with old Russian lenses." And then 35 millimeter, we were both just on board with that. Like, we did the last one on 16 anamorphic, and this one felt like it had to be 35 anamorphic. Also, it had to be anamorphic, not spherical. It just felt right for the story. It felt like it needed a little bit of that magic that anamorphic can bring, that kind of a fairy tale quality, and this like classic Hollywood. I just like the films that I loved when I was growing up were all anamorphic 35 millimeters. So there was something really interesting about doing that. Um, so yeah, and also just the magic quality that anamorphic brings. We did have a couple of like handful of. I had some like Orions that were just like I had as a backup in case I needed low light levels, which I did in the car. Um, you can't really shoot the Lomos like wide open all the way; like they kind of fall apart a little bit. So I tried to keep some sharpness and contrast by using those lenses. And then we used this crazy Lomo zoom that really became like the signature. When we were finding the look of the film, we tested this lens, and it was like, holy crap, this is the look of Anora. It was the 40 to 120 Lomo zoom. It's a front anamorphic zoom with like a leather bellows, like accordion bellows on the front of it.
all
So
right?
there's literal leather on this lens, and it's just this beast of a lens with this big, huge square front. It's beautiful.
Did it weigh a million pounds?
Absolutely beautiful lens. Yeah, it was not as heavy as the 12 to 1 zoom, but it was heavy. Um, and it's just so beautiful and so old. It looks like it should be in a museum, and we were using this lens on film. And, we had to shoot at like a 5.6 to get enough sharpness out of it. Otherwise, it was just pure like milkiness. It would just fall apart. Even so, like the opening shot of the movie was shot with that lens where we're tracking along the dancers and then zoom into Mikey. Um, so yeah, I mean, and these conversations, I gotta say, happened really early, even before I read the script, like about like the look of Anora. Like we were just kind of like I knew what the story was, but Sean was still working on the script and stuff, and we were just spitballing ideas for months and months and months, like almost a year, I'd say, of just like, what's the idea for the next film? Okay, this is it. We're choosing it. Okay, they're gonna go to Brighton Beach to scout. Okay, now I'm gonna go to Brighton Beach to scout. Okay, now I'm gonna do a test. Then we're gonna go back to Brighton Beach and we're gonna do another test. And this happened like over many, many months, just kind of, uh, I guess like soft prep, you know.
And
Uh,
do you think that was really important? Like I know a lot of people skip over pre-pro, especially at the lower levels or the entry levels. Like do you think that pre-pro was critical for getting on
um,
the same page?
yeah, yeah. Well, because I didn't really have a lot of time with Sean in actual prep. It was just so chaotic. There was just so many things happening, and we had this little tiny office in Brighton Beach, and nobody. We were never there. All of our prep happens in scouting, I would say. In scouting, in the van, driving around, like taking photos on set, with like Artemis or whatever, just to like find our frames, our like key. Like Sean is very, very concerned about the photography of the film and the compositions, and um, if we find like a place or a composition, he'll literally like write a scene so that it takes place in
Mm.
that frame, in that place. Like he doesn't he's not gonna write a scene that's gonna look like shit. You know what I mean? Like he's very aware of that in the writing process, and he wrote the script for the location, which is a really important thing too.
Wow, that's fascinating actually. I don't that probably doesn't happen very
No,
often.
it doesn't, because because the weird thing is, okay, that house was actually owned by a Russian oligarch. It was built by a Russian oligarch. Then they moved out during COVID, and there was like hundreds of photos on Zillow because they were trying to sell the house, right? So he was able to like piece this script together and make it so specific and tailored to the space because of that. And it all started because he Googled like what is the best nicest house in that part of Brighton Beach area, whatever, and that house came up. And then he did his research. It was a Russian oligarch's house. Found all the photos, wrote the script, and then our Ross Broder, our locations manager, was able to secure it. So it was like a dream come true when we actually locked that location, and then we were actually able to go there and spend time and uh, block and sort of shot list the home invasion scene, which is really the only scene I will say that we like really honed in on and went deep into the blocking and uh, shot design of because that and then the ending scene, the last scene of the movie are like that. Those scenes are the movie, really. That's kind of how we saw a lot of it, or at least I did. Like we had to nail those two sections, and I think we did. I really love those. Are like two of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. It's yeah, it's where you I think where it really turns a corner there where you're like, "Oh, I see
Yeah,
what this is becoming now." Um
yeah,
yeah, I mean those actors just such deadpan hilarity as well. Like just the
yeah.
timing, especially Igor. That guy just killed me. He was so good.
Yeah, and
Um
I like too how unexpected it is. Like I don't know. Like I can't tell you how many people have told me like, oh, thank you for not making it turn into like a violent rapey thing, or like because it could have gone so many directions when these thugs come to the house, right? But the
that's
fact that
what I thought was going to happen.
yeah, everyone tells me that. I'm like, really? You think that we would do that? But they're so relieved that it just is funny, and that she's kind of the most violent part of the whole thing. I love it.
So those lenses need a lot of light, and I know you like to work pretty fast. So how did you approach like your lighting package, and how much lighting was involved in all this stuff?
I mean, it was always pretty small. I mean, we only really, for the most part, we only ever really carried like a 6,500 watt generator, except at the house. At the house, we had one 18K as well. And at the church, I think I had three 18Ks coming through the windows just because I needed consistent light. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's it. Like one 18K, and we usually bounced it or threw a big rag over the window, or we had to do a lot of like night for day at the house, um, just because we didn't purely because we didn't have enough daylight, and it was dead of winter. We had like 8 or 9 hours of shootable light each day, so I'd have to find a couple of shots to do night for day. So we would just like stretch, 20 bys over the windows and back off the 18K and just hit it and push the film to stop. Everything was pushed to stop in the house, just so I had like a consistent grain structure. And then I'd also exposed everything the same way throughout that entire sequence and took really detailed notes about my exposures so that it was consistent.
So like the strip club and the night party and stuff is that all just practical, or did you carry around like LEDs and stuff, or how did you?
Oh yeah, no, we lit all that stuff. Like the strip club almost had no usable light. It was all just like the messiest, cheapest LED lights. So we kind of had to start from scratch and build it up. Um, and what else? Yeah, and then like the nighttime streets, we try to find areas that had pockets of light. As we're always searching for good areas of light. I just use very minimal LED lighting for most of that stuff. And then I would push the film pretty heavily for one, to beat it up a little bit because I really like that in film. I like the grain. I like the edge of exposure in a lot of ways. So yeah.
What specifically, like what types of LEDs were you carrying around? Just like two Titans, or what did you use?
Yeah, we used Titans. We used some like homemade light pads for the car stuff that were RGB. And then we used a lot of vortexes, and I don't think we had Q8s, but I love the Q8. I usually would carry several Q8s. But I think we had this light called a Pro Light, and that it's basically like essentially like a Q10. It has like a Fresnel lens, and you could swap out lenses in front of it. It's a RGB LED light. It's a great light. And then what else? We had this light that my gaffer called the Dragon of Chaos. It's basically, I could send you a picture of it. It's just like a 5x5 like softbox, but it's like only like this deep, so it doesn't require a huge chimera. I think it's a Kino. It's made by Kino, and then he would do this like spun cotton sort of diffusion over it, or spun wool or something. I can't remember what it was, but it basically diffuses it heavily. It's basically like it becomes like a book light. It becomes very soft. Um, yeah, so that's basically what we use.
Yeah, not
And,
huge by
and
any
I
means.
jokers. I use like for daytime. I do joker bounces and things like that.
Cool. So pretty minimal, and I know we're running out of time here, but just quick before we wrap up, I know that like you've said that you really like to work fast, right?
Yeah.
Like speed is a big priority for you. Can you just break that down, like why you like to work fast, why it's so important?
Well, I don't know. I feel like there's this energy on a film set. There's a lot of energy, and I personally just think that you have to keep that up. And once you start taking a long time to light a scene or to set up like a huge jib on a dolly track on a this, on a that, it can just like bog people down and bog the actors down. I think it's a lot about the actors too. So I like, on this one, for instance, I wanted to lay minimal dolly track. I tried to dolly on the floor, as much as possible. We had these amazing marble floors at the house, and even on carpet, I don't care. I'd dolly right on the carpet. The carpet was smooth enough, and I would just like not even ride the dolly. I would just kind of help push it along like a big slider. um, we did stuff like that all the time. Like that shot in Vegas that like tracks around them in a half circle. Like that was just me and the dolly grip pushing the dolly on carpet. um, yeah. So I think it's about also like I can get bored. Like I get bored. I have like an attention span, and most people have that. And also the directors, like I think if you can get more setups in a day, like I think any director is going to take that, you know. If it still looks good and feels good, but you're getting more setups, like I mean, I remember hearing like, well, why did why did Martin Scorsese um, go with Ballhaus instead of Michael Chapman, who I love Michael Chapman's work, you know, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and then he went with Ballhaus. I think maybe after hours, because he was getting like almost twice as many setups a day. Like he was just getting way more shots. And as a director, it's valuable. So I don't know. I like to work quick. I like to make quick decisions, and I like to keep that energy going on set. And also help the actors out and not have them like just waiting and waiting and waiting. You know, like I like to be able to just, if I'm gonna move in for a close up, that should be like 5 minutes or less. You know, like if we've already lit the scene, you know, or if we're turning around, maybe that's 15-20 minutes, because I like to get all of the pieces in place to make the turnaround fast. You know what I mean? I like to light the whole scene, have everything kind of there, even though maybe if everything behind the camera might be turned off. Boom, we turn around, everything comes on, everything goes off behind the camera this way now, and we're ready to go in 15 minutes, you know? Or I also like to, you know, say there is a dolly shot or a big dolly shot or a big, or a jib or something. I like to get that going ahead of time, you know, like we're shooting the scene. So I always like to leapfrog crew to get ahead on the next thing, you know. I think that's a very important part of filmmaking and being a DP is thinking ahead, and it's hard when you're operating too, because when you're operating you tend to just be like literally tunnel vision because you're looking through a tunnel essentially. um, the camera, but you also have to be mindful of like what's next and what pieces you can get in play, you know, ahead of time. But I did operate on Anora for the whole movie, and I actually kind of prefer that especially with film. I just like to watch I just like to be looking through the eyepiece. It's just a very magical experience, and it's hard to give that up. Digital's another thing. I think, you know, you kind of want to look at a really nice monitor, and I think you can see exactly what you're going to get. So it's easier to just kind of take a step back and oversee more. But on film, I feel like I'm steering the ship from the front of the ship. You know what I mean? I'm right there, and you have to be looking through that eyepiece. That's another important thing.
Yeah. Also, people can't just stand around and look over your shoulder.
Yeah, I'm like, well, get the fuck out of here. Like, you know, like we're working, actors are there rehearsing, whatever. It's like, no, you can't. It kind of focuses the energy in a really, I don't know, just kind of classic old school way. I think it puts a lot of emphasis on the camera, on the set, on what's in front of the camera, what does camera see. You know, people are welcome to, you know, if they want to look through the eyepiece, I encourage that because it's magical. You know, people are always like, oh man, look, I'm not sure how it's going to look, blah, 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 blah. Like, well, just look through the eyepiece. It looks absolutely beautiful, you know, for the set decorator or for the production designer or makeup or whatever, you know, like, just know it looks good. Trust me. Like, just take a look. Or for the director even, you know, because often they see the film through this like video tap, you know, and then it's nice, especially if it's like a shot like, you know, Sean is a very good camera operator himself. So like sometimes I don't think on Anora he really ever wanted to look through the camera, which is weird. But like maybe he did once or twice. But I remember Red Rocket he would look through a bit more. Um, but yeah, he just trusts me a lot too, which is just a beautiful thing, you know.
Yeah, it all comes back to those long-term relationships.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. That was super
Thank you.
informative, and I think people are going to get a lot from it.
Cool, thanks, man. Yeah, it was
Um,
fun to talk about different stuff because I can't tell you, I just did 2 podcasts yesterday, so it's nice to get different questions, you know.